Right. And I welcome all of you to today's webinar. And the key about this is really ensuring the success of your remote or hybrid staff contact center through leadership and technology. And we're really going to focus on this very important subject here for the next hour. And one of the keys with this, of course, is having a lot of active participation. And so I do invite you as well to go and share ideas that you have in terms of being able to just ask lots of questions and be able to go and share ideas in terms of, what you want to learn about being able to go and help with hybrid and remote staffed workshops or remote staffed contact centers. We have a little technical glitch here, which we'll resolve in a moment. Okay. First thing that I want to find out about, though, is who's here with us in this session. So here's what I want you to do right now. If you're here, you can actually go, screen sharing is not working very well. We'll try this again. What I'll have you do right now, though, is in the chat window at the very bottom center of your screen, okay, just open up the chat window there and actually type in your first name and what city you're from. So we got a better idea of who's here. I know people that have signed up for this all across Canada and the US, as well as a few people overseas as well. So just go and type in the chat window, who's here. All right, good. So we got Scott Young from Winnipeg, or Scott, sorry, from Winnipeg. There we go. Okay. We'll see who else is here as well as we go through this. And we'll also fix this little technical glitch as well. Okay, good. Perfect. There we go. We got Marlene as well from Brampton. Perfect. Okay, welcome, Marlene. All right, good. And as you do this, by the way, just be sure to go and switch in the chat window where it says to be from to the hosts and to the panelists and attendees. So everybody can actually see in terms of who's here. Okay, so you can switch it over to panelists and attendees so everybody can see who's here. Okay, good. We'll get a few more folks on board. Okay. All right, good. And again, you can just keep typing it in as well in terms of first name and also where you're from as well as we go through this. Okay, perfect. And be sure to go and type in lots of questions as well, because we'll have a chance to go and do a couple of Q&A sessions during today's session. I do want to welcome our panelists. I want to welcome Afshan Kinder, partner in Switchier Consulting, and also Clive Woodrow, CEO of Advantage Communications. I want to welcome both of you to today's session. And thank you for volunteering your time and sharing your ideas with our audience. And also, too, the session is being recorded. And so other people can also have a chance to go and benefit from this information. And for all of you attending, the link to the recording will be sent out to you early next week. So you can actually share it with your teammates or watch it again if you want to as you go through this. And I also want to thank Intelligence, who's a sponsor for this session. It's a GTAC event. Intelligence is a sponsor for this, and they provide, really help customers in terms of being able to digitally transform the customer experience. And they organize a lot of webinars like this to help share information within the contact center industry as an educational first approach. So I want to thank them in terms of doing this, and they're really great experts when it comes to being able to help with digital transformation and contact center technology. Now, along with this today, too, we'll just start off, actually, Clive, with a question for you. And actually, you can chime in as well. But Clive, I'll have you go first on this one. As a contact center leader, what do you wish you'd known before permanently converting to a hybrid or work from home staffing model?
I think, Mike, the easy answer is I wish I knew everything. But we found out that we really didn't know enough. And we were surprised by almost every element of work from home. We were surprised by recruiting dynamics, how they had to be different. We were surprised by what we thought we needed to do in training, what we actually did in training had to be different. The technology that we used within our contact centers and what we deployed to our agents working from home, that was new. We had to learn some things there. Even the process of the trainer, if you have a trainer that's sitting in a what I'll call a brick and mortar classroom, where they can see and sort of talk to every one of the trainees, that was different. We had to learn about that. And then performance and engagement after, right, is you got to think about all of these people are now home alone in a sense, and how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them interested in the work? How do you respond to their questions and their challenges? Because they have a lot more at home than they do working in the office.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's really important to go know and understand that, right, in terms of what's taken place. Ashley, how about for yourself? How would you respond to that question?
Exactly the same way as Clive. Clive, you stole my thunder. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Ashley.
But I'd also say, COVID didn't really prepare us for what we were embarking on. And had we had that time to prepare, I think that we'd still see gaps. For me, a couple of things bubble up: technology issues, and it wasn't so much the number of technology issues that occurred last year and are still occurring today. When, I talk to other leaders in contact centers, is the number one, time vampire, as we call it, that's eating up a lot of time. And also we had a bell curve of technical expertise within the leadership team. Some people knew how to use Zoom. Some people had never even heard of Zoom. There were lots of things that were on a steep learning curve. And I think the next thing I would say is mental wellness. We really didn't understand the impact this would have for people who were at home in isolation. They didn't have a partner. They didn't live with anyone else. And so, the only social interaction they had were either people at work through a video conference or, perhaps with their leader. And when the pandemic first started, people were like chickens with their head cut off. And so we didn't have as much time to spend with our people as we do now. And I think, if it was all predictable, I think it may have gone a different way, but maybe not. Like these are the unknowns that we've never experienced before. So I think, that's the best way I can answer that question. I don't know how you felt about that.
Okay, good. All right, Asha, that's important to go and share with that. And again, that's sort of that emotional side of things, right? And the isolation piece is really big as well. And especially as you start making this now permanent switch, because again, it's been sort of like for some places a year and a half, supposedly temporary. Now it's being announced as being permanent, right? So changes in mindset as well. And Asha, that ties to my next question for you, which is, as a contact center leader, sorry, the next one is in terms of looking at this. Boy, we're having a few PowerPoint glitches, aren't we? How should you adjust your leadership style to be able to go and help lead a work from home or remote team? Just bearing in mind what you just said.
When we take a look at all of the broad range of leadership skills that we need, there aren't any different ones. I think we're just maybe emphasizing some more than others, and we have to get better at those things. So, for example, our emotional intelligence, our EQ, I think that's a really big thing. And working in this kind of medium, you have to look for, a tone, facial expression, just in terms of how you're seeing that individual, because when you're face to face, you get so much more than when you're in a video. So I think picking up on those cues, it relates back to mental wellness, to ensure that our team members are feeling that they're valued, they're a part of a team. It's inclusive, not exclusive. I think those things are all important. So I would say that is that EQ piece. The second one I would say is accessibility. There were a lot of problems, last year, just in terms of, getting the technology up and running, and we still have problems there. But, how do you get, when you're in the office, you see your manager and you can walk over, right? Now, you don't really see anybody. And so, how do you stay tethered? And there are ways that team leaders can do this in terms of, leaving their video conference bridge open all day. So, it's like a AMA, ask me anything. They can have dedicated time to say, I'm going to be calling you guys this time. So there's a lot of time management pieces that are in there. And then the other piece is running team meetings, and how do you keep people engaged? We're going to have an hour of our time together, in this venue. When you think about a team leader who has to run meetings with a lot of young people who may not have the attention span, how do you keep them engaged and motivated? So there's a lot of great things that, have happened, and lots of good innovation that's happened in order to do that. So I think those are, some of the things that we need to do as leaders to augment the things we're already doing.
Okay, good. Nash, I'm really glad you talked about the different levels of leadership as well, from that team lead level, right? First time leader trying to struggle with how to do a team meeting, all the way through the more senior executive roles in terms of being able to help look at the overall site or the overall group of sites, right? To handle that. Clive, what are your thoughts on that when it comes to, again, the leadership skills? I know you run multiple sites, so how do you find that?
Yeah, I probably what I would add to it is, as Afshan said, right, the leadership of the people has to be different. It has to be probably more engaging. But I look at it take leadership from the organizational perspective and sort of say, how do you, if you're going to take a number of people, you're going to have them work from home, it's going to be a different environment. What is the leadership doing in HR? What's the leadership doing in training to think about, now I've got a really different group of people than what I had in the office? We talked about leadership within IT. Our IT organizations are stressed just supporting sort of our brick and mortar offices. Now IT has to think about their leadership when it comes to supporting work at home agents. So it's not just, not sort of on our contact center leadership shoulders, but the rest of the organization has to pull in and help this initiative. And so I would say to a lot of people on this call is make sure that you get outside of sort of just the contact center and get to the other parts of the organization, because they actually have to adapt and change to support your team. They haven't, you haven't done it before, and they haven't gone through that. So that's what I would encourage a lot of people to think about and work through.
Okay, great. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because sometimes it feels like you're all alone in this as a leader, for your contact center. But again, there's so many other supporting, pieces to this, right, that have to come together. And you mentioned other departments like HR, for instance, or, IT. They're also busy supporting other parts of the business that are also work from home, either permanently or temporary as well. And so they're being stretched thin, and you're one of many people, right?
Yeah, even like the recruiting team, right? If you've recruited and your recruiting organization is sort of based in your office, they've been able to see people, they look resumes, look people in the eye, take them around the office. You can get some aspect of what the company culture is like. But now when you're recruiting basically over a Zoom screen, you don't know what that environment's going to be for that person, where they work. You may not know where they actually live, because all you're going to get is an IP address. It could be somewhere completely different. Happened to me. We hired someone in the Caribbean, and they moved countries on us. We had no idea about that. And so all of those things you have to think about that you just don't do in a brick and mortar. So expanding that thinking is very important.
Okay, good. That's really good advice too. And it kind of ties into the next question. And I'll ask you this one first, Clive, about on the same topic. How is the recruitment piece and the onboarding piece, really change when it comes to remote and hybrid?
One of the things we've seen, probably, if I can talk really more about the COVID timeframe, is, a lot of people have been displaced from their what I'll say are their regular jobs or their career jobs. And with technology today, you can literally go on Indeed or LinkedIn or some other job board, and literally you could have a list of all of the customer service jobs that are work at home in the country, and you can know how much you're going to get paid, all of that. And so that's one of the things, is that the competition is far more in your face nowadays than it used to be. And so you have to be kind of unique in how you approach who you recruit. And then once you sort of got the marketplace, or it may be the angle that you want to bring people into the organization, is that you've got to do a little bit more work and effort to make sure that the right profile for you, and that they're going to be in an environment that they're going to be supporting. So if you've seen someone where their resume be, okay, I've installed air conditioners all my life, and now I'm coming into customer service, you might want to think about, is this person going to last with you within your organization, or are they sort of, dropping in for sort of a temporary work because, they get paid and they don't have to leave home. So I think you got to be thinking about that. But then also, are they do they have the right environment to be successful at home? Again, as I said, we've recruited work at home agents in Jamaica, Mexico, the Philippines, and even Canada, there's a lot of dynamics associated with how you make sure that they have a work environment. In the Philippines, people share their home with their family. There's no one ever home alone in the Philippines. There's always somebody there. So you got to be conscious of that. And is that going to impact the particular job that you're asking them to do?
Okay, good. And that's a really good point, because some financial industries, for instance, they want someone to have a separate locked room with no one else involved, like in the room itself. So for security. Right. So again, it just changes. And so really look at the hiring profiles, right? And the personality as well, as a person, a self-starter, they're good at time management, et cetera, because you can't tap them on the shoulder and have them come back from break. hopefully they'll look at the screen when the chat window pops up to
Right.
say, reminder to go back or whatever.
And it's a good point, right? If they're not of a personality where they want to actually reach out and say, hey, listen, I'm having trouble with this issue, whatever it may be, they're going to have to actually announce that on a sort of a chat window or some kind of technology where people may be a little bit shy. I'm not going to tell anyone that I've got a problem. Where in a brick and mortar environment, you walk around, you could probably tell people who are having challenges, right? Or, I would turn to my peer and I would say, hey, Mike, can you help me with this? How do you do this? At home, you don't have that ability anymore. So you've got to have people who, as you said, are self-starters or have got some initiative within them to help themselves get better.
Okay, good. No, it's really important to have that, just again, to have that as a work from home or hybrid person. Ashley, I know you do a lot of work in terms of training, obviously, and you hire and onboarding work in terms of redesigning those. What are your views as far as that? How does recruitment and onboarding have to go and change to really accomplish this?
Well, I'm going to let you know that the remote interview is here to stay. I don't think it's going to go away, anytime soon. And I agree with Clive. When I look at my colleagues across the industry, everyone's hiring like crazy, like a class a month. And I think, with really poor service levels. And so the competition is high for good talent. And so as much from a recruitment perspective, as much as you're interviewing them, they should be interviewing you, and therefore, to Clive's point, it has to be a good fit. So one of the things that, I've seen as really good practices is setting your candidate up for success. So, making sure they know how to use the technology. Even because there's some people who don't. So, putting a little package together, who are they interviewing? Who is Afshan? Like, what's her background? So I'm going to be asking for yours, but who am I? So it kind of sets the brand and the tone. And so those things are really important. And always to remember, before when we're on site, the interview process isn't just that interview and maybe the first, couple of weeks of trying to, identify who are the best candidates. It's really the 3-month probation. So we're interviewing in the interview cycle, the onboarding cycle, and while they're in operations. And we should be making some very good decisions in terms of fit, because at the end of the day, when you have people who are not a good fit and they're working from home as well, it creates a greater risk, I think, than people on site. So from an onboarding perspective, I think that's really important. I would also say one other thing, and that is, what are we hiring for? And if you think about, we've been talking about AI forever, and, one day it is going to come. And we've been talking about how low-hanging fruit are going to go away and the complex calls are going to be there. And I think we have to start really thinking about the profile of the individual. So yes, they may have some of the basic skills, but what about emotional intelligence? We're going to need more of that in our contact centers. And I feel that the next skill that is really important is their ability to learn. Changes come in very quickly, and we have to make sure that people can adapt to those changes. And it's not just adapting, it's learning something and applying something new. So that's my feeling and my comment about recruitment. But in terms of onboarding, what we've been doing is that we've been using a learning management system. So we're pushing knowledge, to e-lessons, and we're using our learning circles to check for understanding and to practice. So we're actually developing a better skilled agent by the end of our onboarding process. Before, we were standing in front of a class. We could have maybe 20 people in that class, and you have a bell curve of what people understand. Some people didn't get it, some people got it, and some people were bored. But this way, through an LMS, you can actually test the knowledge and you can test for skill. So before you get into your learning circle, you know who knows what and who doesn't know what. So you can actually start closing those gaps. So that's kind of a little bit of what we've been doing, and we've been finding some really great success. And then really polishing it off with a handoff process between training and operations. So really almost a gating process. I always coin it, our folks need to earn the right to speak to our valued clients. like that's it, and they have to earn it. And so we have to make sure that they have everything they need in order to earn it. So those are just a few things that we're doing, and they seem to be working well.
Okay, good. Those are really great comments as well, because especially the part about onboarding and how you want to really control, how much time they spend in terms of learning, in terms of real-time learning versus self-paced learning. Because I know one of the mistakes that a lot of places made when they first went to, sort of the back, March of 2020, was they converted their physical face-to-face course to being like 8 hours a day online. And of course, that was just burning both the trainers and the attendees out. And so having to be a mix of self-paced and, live facilitation really helps a lot in terms of flow, energy, as well as obviously learning and adoption, as well. Right. So I love hearing that approach in terms of, being able to leverage an LMS, do the e-learning plus the live sessions, the actual coaching sessions to go back. So again,
if you don't mind, Mike, let me add in. I think one of the things where companies have been challenged is what technology do you allow the person to bring their own technology to the work at home environment, or do you supply it? And I think my comment to this team would be there's risk if you allow employees to bring their own machines. Risk in the sense that it could open you up to security challenges, PCI, if that's a concern within your organization. But there's also risk from just a support perspective. It's more difficult to take an unknown device and try and fit it into your environment than it is to take a device that you have and ship it out to the employee and say, you use this, it's locked down, it's configured properly. The IT team knows that it works. Might be a little bit more expensive, but I think in the long run, there's far more value in providing the technology. It'll just save you a lot of hassles. So I wanted to throw that in because as you're talking about LMS and all the rest of it, you will waste a whole bunch of time and cycles getting, Mary's PC to just rebooting, or Johnny's headset doesn't interact with this kind of software. There's all of that nonsense that does go on, and you can eliminate it if you sort of standardize your machines.
And that's a good point as well, because again, it's all about the technology, right? And making things work. I know with some bring your own device places, they'll like pre-test the hardware, et cetera. But again, there could be vulnerabilities there, viruses, backdoors, et cetera. So, or just lack of compatibility, can happen as well. So.
We've had situations where an employee will do the interview on one machine and then do training on something completely different to get past the interview. So, you're going to have those types of situations that you want to minimize as best you can.
Okay, no, that's a good point.
I think also if it's just a corporate, where it's a corporate environment where they are providing all the machines, it usually is a bandwidth issue. In terms of, you get different bandwidth in different areas, and we always talk about having a global footprint when it comes to COVID. So, work at home has a lot of benefits, such as, you can actually do split shifts. Really optimize your workforce planning just by having someone work, maybe in the morning and in the evening. They're working 8 hours, but they're not working consecutively 8 hours. And therefore you can optimize, the workforce, and so all of that, we want to get those benefits, but the challenge is that when you have technology issues, I know some people say if you're technically not able to connect with customers for more than 2 hours, you have to come into the office. So it almost defeats the purpose of us having a global footprint when you have technology issues where you have to, go into some site and, be able to take calls. So we're going to have to solve that very quickly if we want to kind of spread our wings and say we want to recruit across Canada, across time zones. And we can now do that because we've got at-home technology.
Okay, good. And that's really interesting too, because of course, one of the advantages supposedly is being able to recruit worldwide, right? And be able to get the best talent from all over the world. Of course, that's one of the challenges is technology, making all that work. Now, I'm going to open things up right now for questions. And so I'll just ask for the people that are here live attending, if you want to type in questions, you can open up the chat window at the very bottom center of the screen, just a little word balloon icon, click on that and type in your questions. And I'll actually read them out loud for Clive and for Afshan. Okay, so you can type in your questions in there. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, I actually have a couple of questions for you. So, and Clive or Afshan, either one of you can ask these questions, okay? I guess my first one will be in terms of, and I'll just change this over to gallery view so everyone can see us. The first question really with this is just on the lines of, since Ashton, you mentioned workforce management. Okay, so Clive and Ashton, any tips, any insights here about how workforce management with a remote or hybrid team differs from having everybody on site? What are some of the differences?
I would just say, literally, there aren't any like big differences. At the end of the day, someone answering the phone at home, or, if I'm just down the street at another office, it doesn't, really matter from a workforce planning perspective. They're taking a look at a number of things, average handle time. So, where there may be, a slight difference is a learning curve, new hires versus existing team members. And also there could be some productivity issues that are like in the home versus at on site. And so that AHT is going to create some issues. So what you plan and what you get are going to be two different things. And so that's really what the challenge is. This isn't so much in workforce management as the intraday and what actually happens during the day. Because I know there's so many team members that are not available because their technology is not working, or something's happening at home. But usually when you're on site, you have a little bit more predictability. It's everybody or nobody. It's not individual. Kind of blackouts. So I think that for me, that's one of the biggest issues. I know we're going to talk a little bit about productivity a little bit later, but I can save my comments for that question if you want, but that would be the other piece of it. Like at the end of the day, its volume is warm, warm bums in seats, and your average handle time or your predictors of service level. So if you take one of those things as a variable, it's your average handle time that's really going to be the issue from at home to being on site.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. And Clive, what do you think about that?
I agree. There's not going to be too much change. If your team does separate out your work from home team from your brick and mortar or office team, I think there are going to be some differences in overall performance, because again, that motivation issue is going to come into play, right? Their ability to maybe go into an aux code where they're not where they're hiding a little bit easier maybe at home than in the office. Again, if you're doing anything internationally, then you could be in countries where there's more power outages, lesser bandwidth that people get at home than what we would enjoy here in Canada or the US. So you've got to think about those. And then anyone who has a teenage daughter that comes home from school, your bandwidth's gone anyway, so you're not working from there on in anyways.
Okay, so infrastructure issues in different countries, right? Bandwidth potentially,
yeah.
Okay. And also too, people do, I know you said don't bring your own devices, but for some places that do bring your own devices, there could be a lot of issues there with compatibility as well, glitches, things like that. So.
Even, when we started doing work in Mexico, what we found out after was someone will have an internet connection in their apartment. But in Mexico, it's not unusual for me to share that internet connection with you, Mike, and you, Ashan, and Ken, and a couple of other people who live in my block, because it's a little bit more expensive. And so we kind of share the cost. To my really bad joke about a teenage girl coming home and to start using all the bandwidth, in a sense, at certain times of the day, there's going to be more people on that service. And so you just got to know that that's going to happen and make sure you find a way to work around it.
Okay, good. All right, good point too, in terms of just looking at all these things that we didn't think about before when people were on site, right? We have to consider that, especially as it becomes permanent work from home or hybrid, backgrounds with us. Okay, good. Now, I'm going to ask a question as well in terms of looking at sort of along the lines of, the whole idea about going to employee engagement. Okay, a little icon here about time for change. So actually, a question for you to start off with is, how does moving to a permanent hybrid model affect employee engagement?
I think the first piece is isolation, and we just have to make sure that people feel connected. Like that inclusivity is a really important element, and so how we do it really requires the team leader and their manager as well, like all of leadership, to have better time management, discipline. Before, you could walk into the office, make eye contact with someone, give them a wave, give them a smile. That counted as, a connection. Now we don't even have that. So we have to make it deliberate, and we have to schedule it. And, and we can do it in a lot of different ways. Video conference, whether we send someone a happy morning emoji, every morning at the beginning of their shift or at the end of the shift. These little things are very important. Starting the conversation with how are you doing? How are you really doing? Is really important to kind of dig further, because you want to look for signs of depression. You want to look for signs that are going to impact the wellness of your employee. And then the other part, and there's a whole thing around, just engagement on an everyday level. The other part, which I don't think we thought about, is what about, the people who are very ambitious? How do they make themselves known in an organization when they're at home? Like, how does the, COO know about me? Because before in the office, I might stand out, I might see that person in the hallway, or, there may be other events. So again, it has to be predictable. It has to be scheduled. And as a leader, it's a conversation. When you think about career development, it's a conversation that we need to have with our team as to how do we give them exposure? How do we give them, the accolades that they need, so other people in the organization are aware of their contributions. And I think that's the biggest worry for, some team members who are at home, is, well, how will I ever, be known to other people? How do I get a promotion? And that kind of thing. One last thing I will say is that, I've polled a lot of team members, before and now, and to say, how are you feeling? Are you feeling supported? And I really want to give a shout out to our industry. I really do, because I think we've done an incredible job of being really aware that, people need help and they need to have that engagement, so whether they send pizzas to people's homes, I've those are like little things so they can have a team meeting. So instead of going out to eat together, everyone's got a pizza in their home, that kind of thing. So I do want to give a shout out to the industry, because I've heard so many great practices on how they're trying to engage individuals.
Okay, good. Excellent. There's been a lot of creative things that people have done, right, with food and with other kinds of gifts as well, or e-gifts, e-cards, etc., to try to keep people engaged with that. So that's good. And Clive, what's your feeling about this as far as employee engagement? What have you done at Advanced Communications to help keep people engaged?
I think the one thing we have to remember is a lot of the agents that we're hiring are younger people. They've come up in the mobile phone world. They're constantly engaged, and all of the things that Afshan talked about, absolutely important. But getting feedback from your team leader on a daily basis, right, is just sort of saying, hey, I know that you're there. You're not out of sight, out of mind. Having the conversation that talks about their performance and lets them know how they're doing from an individual progression perspective, and then also how they might be doing as part of the team. Like where do you stack rank within your team, to get them sort of engaged in that business. As so you got to keep saying, hello, but don't be afraid to sort of talk about performance and business, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what we've got to drive. Why we're still having fun and those other elements of engagement, for sure. And so don't let out of sight, out of mind bite you, because it's easy to do. I'm guilty of it myself. I have one team player that I haven't talked to in 3 days, and all it takes is 30 seconds to say, "Hey, Lita, how you doing? What's up? What are you working on?" And that person then knows that I've thought about them and I care what's going on. So very similar to what Afshan said.
It's good points that both of you are bringing up. That whole idea about, whether it's somebody really ambitious who wants to move ahead, but, the remote, they don't get FaceTime action, as you mentioned, right? Because I know there's been some studies that have shown that people that are, fully remote, for instance, that don't go by the office, they're not seen as being productive, or seen as being sort of a, an ambitious person as such. It's kind of hard to communicate that when you're remote. And of course, the opposite, Clive, that you said is, as a leader, sometimes it can be really easy to sort of forget about or not touch base with people as routinely as you would if they're all in one office building, where you see them in like the parking lot or waiting for the elevator or whatever, now you have to make a deliberate chat or deliberate Zoom call just to kind of, check in on that person. But you're right, it is important. So it's sort of both ends of this, the employee and the leader, right? And how do you get that kind of connection going?
And sort of a broadcast message to the team. Hey team, how you doing? That's not going to cut it for a lot of younger people. They want that direct interaction, right? That you're talking to them specifically, and hearing about them, being open to getting feedback from them. I think that's the important point.
Okay, good.
And I would just add one more point to that, and that is, if you have, if you're in the office and you're working with people in the office and you have a team that's at home, before COVID, do you remember those times when we were in a meeting room and we're all together and we had like one or two people who were on the conference bridge, who were calling in? How many times did we forget about them? So we just focused on, the people that we're seeing. And so, with hybrid teams, at least with having video conferences, seeing them, physically and also virtually is really important because, use that conference bridge when it makes sense, and use a video conference. So I think the medium and the message have to match. So be thoughtful, about that as well. So that would be the other part for engagement, is being judicious as to what medium we use.
And we have a rule in our organization. Not everyone follows it, but you're on a Zoom or Google Meet or your Teams meeting, cameras on, because if it's important enough to meet, we want people focused on that meeting and talking, into the screen, right? So if you're like, I'm on the meeting and I'm like this, you're like, well, okay, so why do we invite Clive, right? Because he's not paying attention. So turning that camera on sort of forces people to have that level of engagement, and it's easy not to, my hair's not the best today, or I didn't wear the right sweater. I think you still force it, because you're going to be better off in the end, because you're going to have a lot more engagement.
Okay, that makes sense. And just as a quick follow-up to this topic as well, when it comes to the hybrid workforce, so you've got some folks that are in the office, some folks that are remote with this. I'll ask a question. Where do you really focus your attention, on the folks that are in the building or the folks that are home? How do you want to split that as a leader? And either one of you can answer that one.
If you're going to have a meeting that is like that, I think you absolutely have to, if you're driving the meeting or you own the agenda, I think it's imperative that you go around the table, both physically and virtually, to make sure that you bring everyone's attention in, or just be that guy, that gal that just pulls in someone, say, hey, Ashen, you're on video. What do you think? Right? Just to make sure that people don't know where the next question is going to get to, and that everyone is sort of paying attention. But it's dead easy, again, right? Just to talk to the people that are at the table. So have a computer, a laptop set up that has Afshan's, face in it, or Mike's face, or Ken's face, or Scott's face at the table. So, you can best represent them as being in the chair.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, the challenge is from an engagement perspective and a participation perspective, right? And that's what you're talking about, Clive. Like, nobody wants to voluntold people. Like there's this awkwardness. Some people have no problem with it. Some people do have a problem with it. And I think if you set the expectations, as you said, everyone, have their camera on. I'm going to ask all of you, your opinion for different types of questions. And so be ready. Just setting some expectations, and people will understand that their opinion counts. They need to, be able to express themselves, because a lot of people, may have an opinion, but may not express themselves because they don't want to look foolish in front of the rest of the team, or they don't think their opinion means that much, whatever it may be, but it actually brings everyone out, and that, I think that's the positive side of video conferencing and having people in the room together.
Yeah, because if someone doesn't understand it, you can see it on their face.
Yeah.
If their camera's not on, you have no idea. But you can look and go, oh, okay, maybe that term, you don't understand that term, or do I need to define that term? Because you see it in their face, they're going like, well, what is that? So use those visual cues. I think they're very important.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make, Clive, because if we were in a conference room, we might be looking at one or two people and be missing, the other people in the room. So once you're on video conference, you see everybody all in one, place, and you can quickly pick out, are they engaged? Are they happy? Are they fidgeting? What are they doing? They're looking down at, their phone, so it's just easier to see. Yeah, for sure. That's a good point.
Okay. And again, it's really tricky trying to manage all these expectations, right? As a leader, as a person leading a meeting or a training session, again, to see if people are fully engaged, right? Online or in the room or both, And I think the real key here that the both of you are saying is just that intentionality as a leader to look for the faces, both in the room and online, and make sure you divide your attention equally with them. Because it is really easy sometimes to overlook people remotely, when you have a whole room full of people physically in front of you. So it's that balance as well, to go and pay attention to. Yeah, that's really crucial. So again, just doing these things to help, improve engagement, right? And make sure that people feel valued is so crucial. I've got another question too, that in terms of looking at this. This one's for you, Afshan, in terms of looking at this, which is, this whole idea about, moving to a permanent work from home or hybrid environment. How does this affect customer experience? We talked about employee experience previously, but now what about customer experience? What's the perception from the customer side, and what does it do for them?
I think if we kind of stick to our adage of a happy employee gives you a happy, customer, like I've always believed in that. And whether it's virtual or whether it's on site, if we kind of keep to that, like getting, people really excited about their work, to Clive's point, giving them regular feedback, consistent feedback. So it's not like silence is not golden. And when it comes to performance, there's a lot of engagement things that we did before COVID. It just means that we have to be more dedicated and structured and disciplined to do them, when it's a virtual environment. So I don't think, like working at home or working on site is actually going to impact the client experience. I think we've all had challenges with the client experience and getting consistency, within a contact center. You as a customer, you call in and you get 3 different answers, right? Each time you call in. So we had those issues before. And we're going to continue having those issues. So it's really what you deploy in terms of your strategy of how you develop your people, whether it be remotely. And there's some really good coaching that's going on remotely, as well as, that we did side by side. So I don't think the activities that we were supposed to be doing and have been doing, will change. And if we really do focus on, creating that intrinsic motivation, with employees, we'll see that in spades, in terms of how it presents itself in a, customer experience. That's my opinion.
Okay, good. All right, excellent. So it's really not about where the agent's actually sitting; it's what they're doing, whether yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
What they're doing and how engaged
been,
they feel. Yeah, how engaged they actually feel. Because at the end of the day, if I'm sitting at home and my leader hasn't called me in a week, and I don't really know how I'm doing, and I guess I'm doing okay, and I'm not you don't have a community chat set up for me, so I can even talk to my teammates, or I can, if they're asking business questions, then I can see the answers to those questions, so I feel I'm part of a team. If we don't have those infrastructure pieces set up, to drive my motivation and engagement, and that I go back to inclusivity, then we're not going to have happy people. When we don't have happy people, we'll never get a good customer experience. It will never happen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think in this time of COVID, customers have been far more relaxed, probably not as on edge. They actually get to speak to an agent, and where before, if there was a barking dog in the background or some noise, we'd all be sort of freaking out about that. It's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Now customers have sort of just grown used to that. There's so much work at home. So I think that's positive, but still nothing replaces the fact that they get answered quickly, correctly, and they get on their way. There's not a customer out there today that wants to stay on the phone any longer than they need to. So we still gotta think about that, getting them answered and correctly and on their way.
Okay, good. So, again, it sounds like it's not so much a difference in customer experience as it is just providing the support tools for those remote and hybrid agents, making sure that you've hired the right people, they're trained, they're motivated, they have some level in terms of self time management skills, and that they actually have access to all the tools that they need, including some of the things that technology with bandwidth, could pose a problem as well being remote. So it really is all about just having enough support for them. And that's sort of the nature of the support seems to change a little bit, but their overall role, of course, is still to help customers. Right.
Yeah.
And the key as a leader is just to make sure they're enabled and empowered to go and do that.
Yeah. Okay. And I think the message to this team on the call today is don't feel bad if you are not got it all together. I mean, we run a professional BPO and we're having challenges and all of the different aspects of work at home. So, if you're doing just a small aspect of it and you're feeling like, oh, this is not working, we are all having those challenges. We just don't go on video every day and broadcast to the world. So doing these kinds of sessions, people can learn from what works, what doesn't work, what would you do differently, and maybe avoiding some mistakes or missteps ahead of time. So
yeah, that's one of the values of having like these kinds of sessions, right? Where we can actually, as a contact center association, have these kinds of, webinars to just share ideas, from an ops perspective, a consulting perspective as well. And I agree with you, Clive, about that, it's every client that I have, there's always little things I want to work on, right? Or things that aren't quite where they want to be at. And, and again, everyone's moving towards that, but it's been a dramatic, year and a half. And I think, Ashley, and you mentioned this once in a past webinar, with me, which is the idea that, it's like a decade's worth of change compressed into about really 6 months from March to September of last year. Yeah. It was like a decade's worth of change. I think those ripples are still being felt, the sort of obvious things, get them home, get the laptop stuff, that's been done now. But now as you make this permanent, now all these other things, recruitment and training and retention, which we haven't even talked about yet, employee retention we haven't talked about yet, but all these things take place now, all the supporting infrastructure, digital transformation, it all comes into play now. And it's still catching up, to the first 6 months of last year. We got them home, they got a laptop, but it's the rest of this now that we really have to sort of finalize and work on. I'm just going to open it up right now again to questions in case anybody in our audience right now has questions. And again, feel free to type it in the chat window. So in the Zoom window at the very bottom center screen, you click on that little word balloon icon for chat and type your questions in there if you have any. Okay, you can type them in there. And I've also got a couple of other ones too that I want to ask you in the meantime. So if you have a question, please type it in. In the meantime, I've got a couple of questions for Clive and Afshan as well. One of the things that I just want to ask you about, as you mentioned, sort of all these things that have to take place to really allow an agent, either fully remote or hybrid at home and in the office as well, to really be effective. I'll just ask, is there anything else that leaders can do in a contact center to help empower or enable their agents to do a really great customer service job remotely or in a hybrid situation? And either one of you can shout an answer to that. We talked about training, onboarding.
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, Mike, you know this because we talked about it in another webinar, but, kind of think of it as a hierarchy. Remember Maslow's hierarchy, where at the bottom is, the basic needs, shelter, food, water, and if you don't have that, then you can't go to the next level type of thing. So I think it's overwhelming, to like, where do I start? How do I begin? And if you use a system like a hierarchy where you can say, okay, have we solved our technology issues the best that we can? Are there expectations that are clear for the team member as to what they can do and they can't do when they are working from home? Do they know how to reach me? Like all of these things are hygiene factors that, it just has to happen. And then we get into where the next level would be like team engagement. Individual engagement. Like how do I, is the performance piece of it. And it's in terms of how do I support and help develop the skills so we can have a great client experience from there. Then the next part of the hierarchy is the team engagement. And then at the very top is a community engagement in terms of, say, across the whole function like customer service. So it's not just my team, it's all the teams. And so there's different activities that we do to kind of create that culture of inclusiveness, that culture of feeling that we're all part of one team. We're all in this together, all part of one team. And I think working systematically through things is really important. So that would be like one thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is, those employees who we had challenges with before COVID and they're working from home, we probably would have never put them at home. right? Let's be honest, we would never have selected them, because before, the selection process for working at home was you had to be a good performer. And if you were, then you could work from home. So now everybody's working from home. So we're going to have to figure out who needs to come back into the office, because there's not that we're going to be like hawks over them, but they just need more day-to-day help, as opposed to, working a little bit independently and maybe getting a check-in once a day. Maybe they just need a little like hourly help type of thing. So I would just ask the team on this call to kind of think about that. I think one of my clients, had said, working from home, it's yours to lose. Like that's how they kind of phrase, yours to lose. If you want to work from home, these are the things you need to do. And if you can't do them, then you have to come, back to the office, so yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense because, prior to COVID, working from home was a privilege. It was a perk, right?
Yeah.
You prove yourself in the office for 6 months or whatever, then you got to go home, as a perk. So it's kind of interesting how that's changed now, in terms of doing that.
It has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And I still think it's important to get together, as physically, together, when we can, of course, safely. But because even when we were working from home before COVID, people had to come into the office at least twice a month, to kind of maybe for an afternoon, for a team meeting, for, town hall, whatever it is. Again, going back to that, be inclusive.
Right. Okay, good. And that's an important point as well. It's somehow, to have that sense of team, because that's the other challenge I found with work from home is that some of these agents get in a mindset of almost being like mercenaries, where they work for one company, but all their whole thing is just their living room with the computer, the calls that drop in, they're mercenary. And also I know we're seeing, and I know Clive, you smile when I say this, is the whole idea about, that, agents are jumping from one company to another. And it's common to see people kind of go from one BPO to an in-house to back to BPO, et cetera. They're bouncing around because before, if you had to go and change jobs, you had to go to an interview at a different building, maybe replan your route to work, drive across to the other side of town. Now you just flip your VPN settings on your laptop from your living room. It's just so easy for people to flip jobs now. So, there's just challenges there in terms of making sure you have a team spirit, and a bigger reason why, agents want to stick around, right? Stay engaged. Clive, what are your thoughts in terms of, anything about any advice you would give to leaders as far as establishing work from home or remote or hybrid permanently?
I think we've talked a lot about it. I don't think there's no substitute for a good amount of coaching and training, and having a team leader spend time with an agent, advising him or her how they're performing, what the targets are, being very crystal clear as to what success looks like and what they need to do to get there. There's so much noise around work at home, COVID, technology issues, that it sort of drowns out the message as to, why do we hire you and what do we expect you to do? So bringing that message back home and making sure that, with all of this stuff sort of put aside, here's what I still need you to do. I still need you to sort of handle calls. I need you to go through this process, this procedure, take these notes, be nice, and do it all within 360 seconds or whatever the case may be. That still has to be done. And that means coaching or training sessions and anything that's going to help that person be successful. Because let's face it, right? If you've been hired and it's been tough through the training of remote and those other things, and you can't do your job very well, I don't know anyone who stayed at a job that they don't do very well. They get frustrated and they leave. And as I said at the beginning of the seminar, there are so many other jobs out there, and I know what they're paying. So if I'm frustrated and not happy, it's just as you said, Mike, it's easy for me to switch. So make sure that targets are set, make sure they get coaching, feedback, and engagement, and recognition for the great job that they do, aside from all of the what I'll call the noises with work at home.
That's a really good point too. As far as looking at a study earlier that said that one of the biggest things that employees want is just to know what is expected of them. What does great look like, and how do I know if I'm actually achieving greatness or not? And unfortunately, when it comes to, this environment, sometimes, I mean, there are very strong numerical, measurements like AHT, other KPIs, et cetera. But certainly on the quality side, on customer satisfaction side, there's a lot of, in some organizations, gray areas there in terms of, what does good look like? And you're right, agents that feel like, I don't know how to win. I don't know how to, I don't know if I'm doing really well or not, or I'm not doing well. You're right. They're going to get frustrated, quit and leave, and ghosting is a challenge right now, both in terms of the onboarding process, new hire training, and also even beyond that into the first couple of years, there's a lot of issues right now with people leaving, so I guess the last question I'll ask both of you is just, what's your advice as far as being able to help retain people, retain employees, in this kind of environment of work from home and hybrid?
I don't think, well, the engagement piece, but it's something that we were doing before COVID, and maybe it's just forgotten, is that we really need to map the whole employee journey, starting from recruitment to onboarding, the handoff into operations, the first 3 months, the next 6 months, and so on and so forth. So what does that journey look like? And what are the expectations along the way? Because that's like, here's the thing, is when I, as an employee, know exactly where I'm going, what the expectations are, and and you're supporting me in achieving, this next milestone, and then I know what the next milestone is, you're going to start retaining employees. And it's exactly what Clive said. If I don't feel supported, or I'm failing here, like I'm miserably failing, and I don't like this feeling, I'm going to go someplace that's going to maybe not make me fail. So culture is very important, and like that kind of employee journey mapping is, and the execution of it is really becomes kind of tightly knit into your culture, because it's one of being supportive, it's one of making sure people are successful. So those are some of the things that I think are really important. And then, as Clive said, the coaching, the deliberate practice that we should do with our team members. It's very, very important in order to build their skill. So really dedicated time to build skills. I was just talking to another colleague of mine even today, and they've got a 1-to-30 ratio of, a team leader to, and this is a very large corporation, international corporation, and and actually they said, usually it's 30, sometimes it's 35, and so how do
That'll
you,
never work.
Yeah.
right.
Never.
And they do projects.
Oh my
They do
gosh.
projects, so they're not coaching at all. And so, so it can be, then they're wondering, why are we not meeting our KPIs? Why are they bouncing like this all the time? And they go, isn't it odd? Like whenever I coach, we see results. And when we pull the, foot off the accelerator, it dips down again. So, but again, it's a cost benefit equation. And so it's really kind of proving that through a test and learn methodology that's really going to help. So I know I'm a bit long-winded. Sorry, it might be stealing your thunder.
It's okay. It's okay. Clive, do you have any last thoughts as well?
Yeah, probably it's grit to get on board. Like if it takes a lot of effort and heavy lifting by the employee, you're probably not going to keep them a long time. So having all of your processes really well honed, working well, consistent, I think that's going to be. I mean, I remember we hired very quick. We had to hire like 12 Canadians very quickly. We decided to send their equipment at home. And I know like 6 of them got only part of the gear that they needed. And so if you're an employee, you're thinking, okay, this company cares about me, but okay, you sent me the monitor, but you didn't send me the keyboard. Like, so they're gonna form opinions about that. If you miss something on an HR payroll perspective, all of those little things, they're not going to be able to go fix it because they're not in the office. They're going to have to rely on their team leader to go and get all of that stuff done. And if that irritant level is really high, you're probably not going to keep them for long. So look for things like that. It's a good point that Afshan raised. Is like, look at it from the employee's perspective, and it might uncover some things.
Okay, that makes sense as well. And Clive and Ashton, thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your experiences with our audience. I think you had a lot of great points, and I think the audience really benefited from that. Great lessons learned in terms of being able to help with, permanent work from home or hybrid workforce. So thank you both very much for doing that. I really appreciate that.
More than welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, oh, you're welcome. And I just want to share a couple of quick announcements as well before we go. So a couple of quick announcements here as well. First one is about GTAC, the Greater Toronto Area Contact Center Association. They're having the 12th annual GTAC virtual conference. And this, by the way, isn't just for the Greater Toronto area. Anybody anywhere in the world can log into it. It begins actually at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. So the times are Eastern time to 5. But it's a really great session. Lots of topics that we're covering off during that session. It's a mix of both pre-recorded and live sessions. So for the live ones, you can definitely ask questions, as we go through it. And there's more information there at gtac.ca. The other announcement I'll make as well is just to go and thank Land Intelligence and 8x8 for sponsoring this session and being able to help us, put forward this session and be able to help share this information with you. So I want to thank, them as well for that. And also I want to thank everybody that's attended right now in the audience, as well as anybody that's going to watch us later on for the recording, for being able to go and, be with us and hopefully get some really great ideas from Clive and Ashan, from both of you as well. So I want to thank all the audience members too for that. And Clive and Ashan, again, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate this and great talk. I love this. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.